Maturing. I was 28 when I realized I couldn't possibly go on this way any longer. My husband had pressured me into starting college. He had a whole plan worked out. I would get my education while he worked, and then I would support us while he learned a trade. After we had both been through school, we would start a business together. I liked the plan, even though it was hard for me to imagine having a successful business with someone who was abusing me regularly and was always intoxicated. It appealed to the part of me that still hoped things were going to change and we'd have a happy ending. Going to college did something amazing for me, though. Knowing how much money I would have to pay back for my education motivated me in a way that my parents had never tried to when I was young. Having something to motivate me, I worked hard and was astonished to realize I was smart. I enjoyed school and learning. I began to feel like a real, competent grown-up. I made the dean's list almost every semester for perfect grades. I wasn't just capable of getting a degree, I was really smart, and good grades came easily when I applied myself. This gave me more hope than anything else in my adult life had to this point. It raised my self-esteem and confidence so much that I knew without a doubt I could find a way to survive without my husband. By the time I turned 29, I had asked him to leave. I didn't think it would be forever. I truly thought he would hit rock bottom, get sober, and come back to us a stronger, gentler, more loving man. Instead, he added a meth addiction to his alcohol use, became even more violent, and I knew it was really over for good. I had to choose me and my kids over the man I loved. I felt bolstered by my intelligence, but I was terrified by being alone and lonely. I had slept next to that man every night for more than 12 years. I didn't know how to be alone, so I ignored the wonderful advice I had been given that domestic violence victims wait at least a year to get involved with anyone new after leaving an abusive relationship. You can't be happy and alone. I had to find someone to give me attention and to love me if I was going to be happy. After all that time, I deserved to feel loved. In my attempt to find someone, I looked at my high school boyfriends, and before I knew it, John and I were dating. I thought he had changed so much since school. He was nice to my kids and acted fatherly toward them right away. We were all craving masculine attention and praise, and he gave it to us. I was on birth control, but got pregnant just a couple of months into the relationship. I hadn't planned on having more kids, and I just started noticing warning signs in my new relationship. Red flags and alarm bells were going off in my mind, but there was now a baby on the way. Everything had gone so fast. John went back and forth often, saying he loved us and wanted to be with us one day, and the next telling me he didn't, and what I, or my kids, needed to change in order to be good enough for him. I couldn't raise a baby and my older kids by myself. My kids deserved a dad. I had gotten us into this mess by dating too soon. I hadn't taken care of myself and my kids like I should have. Kevin had been right. I wasn't good enough, wasn't smart enough to make it by myself. I was so stupid to let myself get into this situation. All of my insecurities came back. I had to make this relationship work to prove to myself I was worthy of love and a happy family. You can't have a happily ever after without a Prince Charming. I would tough it out and find a way to make it work. If I could only be good enough, I could make my family happy. I could fix this. If I were good enough, he would love me and treat all of us right. I should have heeded the warning signs, but instead, I married John. I think I did it just to prove to myself that I was worthy of being married. Maybe I thought that if I were married, he would have to stop denying I was good enough for him. Things continued to get worse. I had wanted to make life better for my kids, but I just traded in their dad, a man I truly loved more than anything, for another abusive man who I wasn't even sure I liked. I was a terrible mother. I may not deserve happiness, but my kids did, and I ruined their chance at a good childhood by getting into this relationship. He had begun being mean and acting resentful toward them, especially my daughter, who was going through puberty in addition to my divorce from her father. My new marriage and her new baby brother, and she was constantly acting out. I had 2 children with my second husband. We were only together a few years, but they were damaging ones. He was not as physically abusive as my first husband, but the emotional abuse was much more intense. At the age of 14, my older daughter moved out to get away from him and our relationship. She lived with her grandparents for a while, but ultimately chose homelessness and drugs over the dysfunctional family I had to offer her. My older son became very quiet and reserved and pulled away from me in many ways. My young children suffered from witnessing our fights and also experiencing a similar form of back and forth love from their father. I believe he is a narcissist, and the damage from my first marriage and my codependency had made me the perfect codependent match for him. As my misery increased, so did the severity of the symptoms of my mental illness. I was also diagnosed with fibromyalgia and was in constant physical pain as well as emotional pain. I loved my kids more than anything, and they were the only thing that kept me going most days. I couldn't fail the younger 3 the way I had failed my oldest. I had to be there for my kids no matter what. I longed to die, though. I thought about death every day. I wanted to be there for them because someone had to be, and they deserved someone to be. But I felt like I was failing them. I failed everyone. I failed myself. I'd failed at life, and I wanted it to be over. Finally, I realized that if I'd had the strength to leave a man I loved, I had the strength to leave my second husband too. Maybe they were both right and I would never make it on my own, but I decided I would rather not make it than deal with the emotional abuse any longer. I applied for state housing and waited patiently for my name to reach the top of the waiting list. When I moved out, I took only what we needed most and left so much behind. I was still terrified of being alone and unloved. I had reconnected with Donald, who, like John, I had also dated in high school. Comparing notes, we discovered that over the course of time, friends and our significant others had orchestrated to keep us apart for their own reasons. It seemed everyone had been against us being friends. We had many similar life experiences, common acquaintances, and had been in close proximity to each other often, but hadn't come together at all since high school. Right away, I felt smitten with him again. I felt just as magnetically drawn to him as I had in high school. Unfortunately, Donald also had unhealthy addictions. We only dated for a short time before he cheated on me and then left me for another woman. After he started seeing her, we kept sleeping together on the side. I excused my behavior because I was honest with her that he and I were still sleeping with each other. I didn't lie or try to hide it, though I knew he did, and she often didn't believe my truth. I could never have a real relationship with Donald. I would never live with Donald or have a real family with him. He would never want me more than he wanted drugs, alcohol, or other women. I still saw that same beautiful, sensitive boy in him, though, and I just couldn't resist him. I felt like my heart was connected with his, and I couldn't bring myself to do anything to sever that connection. I tried dating other men, but nothing very serious ever developed. I was on my own and learning to be more independent, despite my attachment to the affair with Donald. I was experimenting with drinking and partying with friends for the first time in my life. I slept around a little. I sometimes felt like I was reliving the teen years I had lost when my daughter was born. I knew this behavior couldn't last long, but I was having fun and I refused to apologize for it. Even when I knew I wasn't giving my very young children as much attention as they deserved, I felt like I had earned this time to be myself. Looking back, I guess I was going through what some might call a midlife crisis. I let it play itself out until I got too tired and bored with it, and then I pulled away from the friendships I'd made and began isolating myself. My fibromyalgia symptoms worsened, and I began to wonder regularly what my future held. I had lost my job as an intern at Full Employment Council during a government shutdown and was not able to find a new one that I could physically keep up with. The pain I was in made it hard to play with my kids, and I had little patience with them. I was very sensitive to sound, and the normal noise of children at play was extremely painful to me. The sound of fussing or whining was almost unbearable. I had gotten away from the abuse, but now my body was failing me. My life was only getting worse. There was no cure for fibromyalgia. I would be in pain for the rest of my life. I relied on medication to get through each day, taking 14 prescription pills a day. I moved as little as possible to avoid pain and fatigue. I didn't eat right because convenience meals were much easier to handle. I continued to have an affair with someone who had a girlfriend and lived a high-risk lifestyle. I was still letting John manipulate me into fights and draw me into drama regularly. I had gotten out of my marriage, but I had failed to start caring for myself. I was spiraling even deeper down into despair.